The highest level of mastery is simplicity. In fact, it was Leonardo da Vinci who said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. What does that really mean? Sophistication and simplicity. Because the more you think of things, you've probably heard about the quotation, analysis, overanalysis creates paralysis. And everything really that is overindulgent, everything that we give to the mind, the more we think about things, the more we go into the story mode. Because if you've been watching these videos right now, hopefully this is starting to make sense. The story mode is how we communicate and how we identify with ourselves through stories. We were not born like that. We were taught that through conditioning that happened in school, through our parents and everything. I mean, there is a level of innocence through that conditioning, but at one point you have to come to recognize, and you have to come to wake up to realize that it's not you. None of it is you. Nothing that you see, nothing that you think is you. That's the ultimate depth of true spiritual awakening, which is impossible to put into words. This channel attempts to do that, but also recognizes that, at least in this case, it was not a spontaneous awakening. It took time, unfortunately, because it was a painful process. But that doesn't mean it's the same for you. Maybe you're watching this and you are a fully awake being, and you can resonate with 100% of what we're saying. You don't even have to listen to this. I found with myself that after a certain point, I love so many of these great beings, like Nisargadatta Maharaj, Ramana Maharshi, Eckhart Tolle, Rumi, Muji, Rupert Spira. I mean, there's so many beautiful, beautiful beings that have realized this truth and are talking about it so eloquently. So it's so humbling to speak about this, and that's why I waited over a decade really to start speaking, even though the big realization was 5 years ago. I had many smaller openings, and I hope you understand what I mean by openings, like small realizations, like small aha moments, like something hits you and go, oh wow, these are small cracks in the structure of the ego. The ego is, simply put, the conceptual idea we have of who we are. We have an idea of who we are. And notice that one of the ways to tell that is not really real is because it's not consistent, it's not stable. The way we feel changes all the time. The way we think about things changes all the time. So question and ask yourself, if that is the case, that things are always changing in terms of what we perceive to be our personality, if it's always changing, then which one is the real you? Because some people know you as, oh, this is he's such a friendly person. But then you might have bumped into somebody in the supermarket and you got into an argument, and then they said, oh, I really met this unfriendly person. But then you say, no, I'm not this, but then I'm this. And some days you feel one way, some days you feel another. So who is the real you? Realize you're not going to find that in your mind. You're not going to find that through thought. In fact, the more you look for yourself in thought, the more you give it to the mind, the more you give it to thinking, the more and more confused you're going to be. Paralysis by over-analysis. That's what it is. So today I want to talk about the flow state. Because that's eventually what happens when you wake up. You become effortlessly in the flow of life. And that's why things become so much easier. I'm just talking again from personal experience. This channel is just from my own personal experience, and I encourage you to not believe absolutely anything that I tell you. You find this out for yourself. And the fact that you're watching means that there must be something that's resonating here, which is beautiful. This is what it was like for me. I was listening and listening and listening. At sometimes I didn't even understand. I remember the beginning, many years ago I was listening, because my really big interest came from about 15 years ago when I read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, given to me by a very dear person. And that helped break the first crack when I understood I was not the thinker. Yeah, you're not the thinker. You're not the one who's thinking. You're observing that. And if you want more help in understanding that, look at the video called Observing with Detachment. But let's talk about the flow. I love this. The highest level of mastery, and I quote here, the highest level of mastery is simplicity. Perform with effortless effort, flow without resistance. That's Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu wrote the Tao Te Ching, one of the most beautiful books ever written by mankind. Stunning book, beautiful book, and every sentence is filled with such truth and such love that you just it resonate, at least for me, it resonated very, very strongly. It was like one aha moment after the other. So what does he mean by that? Perform with effortless effort, because the more you try, the harder it is. The more you go back to your conditioning, because that's, again, you are taught to do that, to think things out. Oh, I gotta figure this out. Some things can be figured out. The problem arises when your personal identity is so deeply embedded within your psyche that it almost always, by default, okay, becomes an aspect of everything you're trying to figure out, because the context of your reality is based on that individual me, that little me, that ego, which is fictitious. It is a contrived mental concept. It is a made up concept through language. You make up your concept. You make up this reality through languages. You are not a concept. You are not a sound. You are not a word. That's imagination. You are not imagination. When you realize all of these things, you just are. Just be the I am. Be still and know that you are. Be still and know that I am. When you are present, the mind stops. You move with a natural ease, fully observed in the moment. Eckhart Tolle. The thing is, I intellectually understood that a long time ago. The experience came much later, and the realization and the profound permanence of that realization took even longer. So the great news is, hopefully you can just immediately get this from the deepest levels of your soul, which would be wonderful. That's called a spontaneous awakening, which is quite rare, but it happens. In Eckhart Tolle's case, it was spontaneous. But the assimilation of it can take a while, because the realization is so profound that it's assimilation as a result of how deep it breaks the shell of your personal identity to be able to flow with the world without identity is different. So for example, and it's beautiful because like right now when I'm speaking with you, I don't speak as a personal identity, as a person per se. I can use personal words and the context of subject and object just in plain communication, but I don't see myself as that at all anymore. I don't identify at all as a person. There is no more effort to keep up that shadow person, that ego some people calls the personal identity, because it's based just on thought. And it's addictive. Thinking is addictive. And once we just take a little space, just detach, because there is space, you are able to observe that. You're able to observe everything that happens, by the way. So remember, you cannot be what you observe. It's impossible. This is like a movie in a sense. It's like a three-dimensional movie, and this was something that one of my bigger realizations just made it. This is the way I could explain it. It's like a three-dimensional movie. You are this personality. You are observing it. It's a character. You're playing a character, but you're also every other character. You're the entire set. You are everything. You are the director. You are the writer. You're the screenwriter, whatever they may call it. You are everything in this movie. You're observing the whole thing. So when you are able to observe with detachment, that puts you immediately in the flow state. If you are too absorbed in your mind, it's going to be much more difficult to be in the flow state. And that's why I've always laughed at when people used to say, if you're going to perform, they always say, oh, be yourself. The fact is, most people have no idea what they mean by that. Sorry, it's just, now I recognize be yourself means be your true self. Because then you're totally in the flow. Then you just drop everything. You're just in the flow state. You're just here, present right now. There is no effort required to be in presence. You are already naturally present. But that presence is not a time-based phenomena. That presence is the ultimate reality. It is not time-bound. It is boundless. It is eternal. It is not objective. It is a purely subjective source, for lack of a better word. It has no boundary. It can never be talked about. It can never be put into words. Because we operate in this paradigm, in this third dimension, through words. Words have a very heavy feeling to them because oftentimes they're accompanied by emotions. Emotions are the same thing as thoughts in a way, because they do come and go. Which emotion has stayed? Even if you say, oh, I've been anxious my entire life. Okay, I'm sure there's variation, no? Sometimes you're a little less anxious or not. What about when you're sleeping? So remember, emotions are coming and going the whole time. You've experienced both a form of happiness and a form of sadness in this life. That's the duality. That's the polarity. Recognize that is the entire phenomenal play here is based on duality. It's based on the polarities. Good and bad. Male, female. Binaural number 0, 1. Everything is a polarity. And when you recognize that that polarity is the play of this existence, and that's how that's how the self manifests itself, and that's how it experiences itself. You are experiencing yourself through the duality. If there was no duality, if there was no subject and object, you would not be able to have experience. But the reason we have experience is because of the subject-object duality. But once you recognize you're not the subject-object duality, experience becomes far less serious. Life becomes far less serious. Again, I'm just talking 100% in my case from my experience, because I want this to be 100% authentic. This is nothing that I learned. I learned all of this through my own introspection. And that's why I cannot teach any of these things. And nobody can teach any of this. You have to learn this yourself through your own experience. And if you're hungry for this and it makes sense, my encouragement to you is keep going, because it just gets sweeter and sweeter and more beautiful. I went from somebody who had a very neurotic, difficult, heavy, psychologically heavy life to somebody who feels completely free, open, at peace, deeply in love with life, passionate about life itself, and just in this complete silence, in this miraculous existence, because this existence is absolutely amazing once you see it in that way. So, thank you for your attention. And I hope you have a beautiful and a blessed day.